It's time to start. So if everybody can grab their seat. Sorry about the heat, but it's wonderful to have you all here. I'm Doug Lipton. I did Shed along with my wife because we wanted to celebrate farmers and all the creators and crafters from our watershed and bring community together just like what's happening here tonight. So we're very excited to have 350 Sonoma and the Farmers Guild and CAF do a program like this to support all the good work that's going on in our farm community, particularly in this day and age. It's so important to do and support really positive, passionate work. And so we're honored to have you all here. I'm just curious, how many of you have been here? Is this the first time you've been in Shed upstairs? Wow.
All right.
Wow, okay. Well, good. So keep checking out our newsletters for all the workshops and events we have up here. And so without much further ado, I know I'm excited to hear what you guys all have to talk about. And I'd like to introduce Evan Wigg, who has been, started the Young Farmers Guild and then realized that we needed to get all farmers on the land. So it was the Farmers Guild, and now it's working with CAF, which is fantastic that there's a collaboration of two groups, because I think the more that all of us can do, and any of you associated with any groups or environmental groups, the more collaboration and synergy we can get from people working together is just critical in this day and age. So without much further ado, I will turn it over to Evan.
Thank you so much, Doug. Let's give a round of applause for Doug in the Shed. What you don't know is I was once introduced to Doug as Dr. Dirt. He's actually got a very deep knowledge of everything we're going to be talking about. We could very well throw him up on the panel as well. So thank you for being part of this really important conversation. Just also want to say a huge thanks to everyone else who's been able to be here and make this event possible. Like I said, my name is Evan Wigg. I'm Membership and Communications Director for the Community Alliance of Family Farmers and the Farmers Guild. And I'm just really stoked to see that we filled the house with this conversation. This is the fact that this topic can bring this many people together is really inspiring for me. So the guiding question that we frame this conversation around is, can regenerative agriculture and healthy soils combat climate change? And on a day as hot as this, I'm thinking a lot about global warming and climate change in general. But what we're talking about here isn't a silver bullet, and we're not even talking about the solution. We're talking about a shift in the way we relate to the natural world. Everything we're going to be talking right here, with incredibly lucky to have the skill and expertise here, is really about partnerships and relationships. In this case, it's a partnership with the microbial life that is underneath our feet and in our soil, and restructuring that relationship in a way that not only stops the emissions of carbon into our atmosphere, but can actually sequester them and actually create a byproduct in that process that happens to be our next meal. I'm going to leave the science and the nitty-gritty of those topics to our experts this evening, who we're incredibly fortunate to have with us. And I'm going to talk about a different kind of relationship and a different kind of partnership that's just as necessary if we're going to be combating climate change. What I love about this event is that it's a partnership between an agricultural organization and an environmental organization. For years, decades, for as long as I've been alive, those two communities have more often than not found themselves at odds. Oftentimes at opposite sides of an argument over water, over land, over natural resources. Especially here in California, it's a classic debate. You will always find agriculture at odds with environment, and that kind of relationship is more detrimental than any power plant, more detrimental than any carbon emission, because as you're going to learn tonight, the participation and commitment of our agricultural community in combating climate change is absolutely vital. And without a partnership between agriculture and the environmental champions and advocates and those really bringing the science forth and saying we need to come up with some solutions. Doesn't matter how many Teslas we get, how many power, solar panels we put on our roofs. Nothing's going to save us if we can't get those who are stewarding our land and our soils. And I'm not just talking about the little hippie farms here in Sonoma County. I mean every single agricultural operation in America to actually recognize their part. And I think that if we can reframe the conversation, if we can get partnerships and collaborations just like this happening, where we have an environmental organization, an agricultural organization filling an entire room full of people, and actually really being able to recognize the constraints, where they're coming from, the need to be financially successful, the need to really come up with some across-the-table solutions, then we're really we have some hope. So this just the fact that we can fill the room like this, and the fact that we have two organizations working together in this way is as hopeful to me as a lot of the incredible scientific data you're going to hear about tonight. And thank you to 350 Sonoma County for joining us in this incredible. So Ann, where is Ann? Oh, Ann. So Ann right in front of me. I'm looking out there. So Ann, thank you so much for being a partner. And
So thank you very much. And I particularly want to thank Doug and Cindy for making this beautiful site available to us as a donation to our community. So I take great pleasure in introducing you tonight. I'm not going to take very long to do this. But I have heard for a whole year about the work of David C. Johnson. A young man in our group went all the way up to Chico to hear him give a presentation, and he came back and he said, this research could change the world, could really make a difference. And so we began to talk about how could we get David here in Sonoma County to help us all see the world in a somewhat new perspective. I remember really being amazed when somebody said to me, and I know you've all heard this, but it's worth thinking it again, that in one handful of healthy soil, there are more living beings than there are people on the planet. Beneath our feet is a whole world of life, a world matrix that we are only now beginning to explore with any kind of understanding. And David is a pioneer on that journey. I can't wait for you to hear his story of his process and his amazing results. He said he was just as amazed by his results as everybody else, and has been urgently reaching out to not only farmers and agriculturalists and scientists, but to the environmental community, because the results have so much bearing on climate change. So, David, where are you? Giving this to David C. Johnson.
Thank you, Ann. I do appreciate you inviting me here. What a wonderful looking crowd. Microbes are why our Earth is what it is today. Every element that's circulated on this planet at some point in time is microbially mediated. Bacteria came along about 4 billion years ago. Then photosynthesis about 3.5 billion years ago. At that point, it was probably one of the biggest changes on this planet. We were able to capture energy from the sun and store it and utilize it at a later time. That led to the great oxygenation event, and if you were an anaerobe at that time, that was not good news for you. But if you were a eukaryote, which was starting to come on the scene, that was what helped you survive. That led up to the buildup of the ozone layer to protect our environment on the surface of this planet. That enabled your first single-celled animals. Your Goma mercata, curiously, came along about the same time that plants came on the land surface, since they do work together. And us, we're the new kids on the block. We got to enjoy everything that came before us and what they've given us. It's been a tumultuous past on Earth. As you can see, atmospheric CO2 has been up to 7,000 parts per million. Our temperatures have gone up to 25 degrees C. Currently, we're at about 400 parts per million and about 11 degrees C. It's never been better on the Earth as far as organisms like us. During this path, though, you can see there's several drops in CO2. And then one of the first drops was the Cambrian Explosion. All the corals and shelled animals were grabbing CO2 from the air and calcium carbonate into their shells. The next, first land plants, was the Greer's carp. When they developed, you can see another drop in CO2. Lignin, vascular plants, was the next evolutionary adaptation. You can see another drop. At this point, during the Devonian period, we had 8-meter tall fungi. Progynasperms, roots, and leaves developed. And again, another precipitous drop. All of our coal built up during the Carboniferous period. And the reason it built up is we didn't have any lignin-degrading microbes. Once they came on the scene, here you can see right here, CO2 started to increase. Angiosperms, another adaptation, a little more efficient utilization of energy from the sun. Again, you see a drop. Again, you start to see a drop. Down to our cooling period here, landmass positioning, mammals and ungulates. And ungulates are what gave us the soils that we have today. It was their ability to graze on the terrestrial surface and their influence on the disturbance of that surface that gave us all the carbon that built up in our soils. Every organism on this planet depends on this microbial community. We have evolved as superorganisms. Everything in our life is dependent on these microbes. Our well-being depends on our microbial population, its structure, the biological functionality of that community, and also the environment with which it resides. As a human superorganism, this is what microbes do for us. They digest our food, generate nutrients for us, synthesize vitamins, break down these antibiotics, detoxify carcinogens, promote cell renewal, support your immune system, control our appetites and our cravings, alter our immune system for allergic disorders, prevent asthma and skin disorders. They also have been found now to turn on and off genes in our body that regulate brain development, anxiety, depression, autism, arthritis, and emotional behavior. Do you feel like you're really in control here? One example of when your microbial community gets out of function is Crohn's disease. Usually it's brought on by a severe regime of antibiotics, and you wipe out the stomach biota, and it gets replaced by Clostridium difficile. People suffer for years with this. They've had resections of bowels to try to cure it. They've had more antibiotic regimes, and yet they found out that you could have a fecal transplant from a healthy donor, and many of these people, up to 80 and 90% of them, have been cured within 24 hours after restoring the microbial community structure. My position on this is, well, agriculture is kind of in that position right now. What if we can do that in agriculture? Nature has a ladder of succession and take over from a bare soil parent material up to your old growth forest. It's a natural flow of the ecosystems on this planet to move towards that end. And as you can see, there's a change from bacterial dominance to fungal dominance along that path. You also have increasing ecosystem productivity. Here is one of your California soils in your rice fields. As you can see, I'm focusing down through each layer after layer after layer of bacteria. All the little things you see swimming around are bacteria, and very little fungi. It's a disturbed soil. It's an anaerobic soil. This is what a healthy agricultural soil will look like under a microscope. You have a lot of fungi, which are these are pieces of organic matter that are completely coated with fungal mass. And as you can see, the other ones moving around are the bacteria. This is a sample of soil from the Muir Redwood Forest, an old growth forest. You can see very few bacteria, but you have more fungi relative to the amount of bacteria. So where we are in the agri-ecosystems now is here. We grow weeds really well. Where we need to be is here. Fungal bacterial ratio roughly 1:1. And let me qualify this. Fungal to bacterial ratio is going to be a qualitative approach here. We have a lot of difference in position, where spatial differentials. So right now it's the best we can do. I'm working on a genomic process that will hopefully help us do this a little better. So agriculture is controlled disturbance. We have to keep it in this range in order to grow the foods that we like to eat, because we don't eat old growth forest trees very well. This is nature's controlled disturbance, and they do it well. So what we have to do is mimic them. Basically, they're going around, they're grazing, they're inoculating the soil with all that comes out of them, either saliva or the manure. That manure in a healthy ranchland ecosystem is usually rolled up in balls and put in the soil within 48 hours. And it goes into the soil and is basically composting in place. So this developed in a USDA project that I had, do something good with dairy manure. The people that I had it before I had it had been working on this 10 years, and they'd come to the conclusion that compost was bad for soils. I said the same thing until I looked at the data. When you look at the compost they were producing, they were using the windrow composting process. And what we have in the dairy manure there is very saline conditions, from 30 to 44 millisiemens. Plants don't like anything above 10, and really 3 is the best, or less is the best for them. So they were putting on compost that was around 30 to 44 millisiemens. And yes, they were right. It's damaging the soils. So my wife got tired of washing my clothes, and she said, well, we're going to figure out a better way to do composting than windrow composting, because I've been trying that, and it didn't really work. So we came up with a little bioreactor. We wanted something that we could parallel process. You could do this at a commercial scale. It takes little equipment, and the product that you get out of it is, well, if I hadn't done this, my research wouldn't have gone anywhere. It reduced water usage in composting by 6 times. Now, we live in the desert. It can take up to 1.5 years to do composting, and it takes a lot of water, of course. Reduced the composting time there by 66%. We were actually able to reduce the salinity from 30 down to less than 3. It was also amenable to vermicomposting. We would put worms in after it hit about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that also helped the process as well. But most importantly, it produced a high-quality, fungal-dominant compost. This is what it looks like when it's done. I picked out a few worms on there. But when you grab it with your thumb and finger, it's like clay. You can squeeze on it and it oozes out. You'll see here. And also, if you grab it by a ball, if you're into biodynamics, a lot of your compost ends up looking like this. I did some analysis of phylogenetic analysis on the compost through the different temperature regimes, starting at about 160 on down to 60 degrees. So you see the ebb and flow of the phylum through this composting process. As you can see, the firmicutes start out strong, but then they tail to nothing in a mature compost. Proteobacteria start strong, come off, and then increase from there. Bacteroidetes increases through the process. I did a comparison of this. I did this in 2007. I looked at another compost 10 years later, and this is the final product. You can see how similar it is to the final product of a 10-year ago project. So I see this maybe as a possible economical way to judge the quality of the compost and the maturity of the compost. It cost about $60 to do that test, so it's very economical. One thing you need to understand is not all compost are created equal. The compost that we had, I did a growth comparison. These are two from that composting process, and they had twice the growth of any of the composts that are available in our area. This last one, I put in the greenhouse for 4 months previous to doing the test, and I've watered it daily to flow through just to see what nutrients would be leached out. So you can see it grew better than the others. So nutrients in this environment find it hard to escape because it's such an aggressive, biologically aggressive environment. Everybody says NPK is the holy grail of agriculture. You can see very poor correlation for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. At this point in my life, in my research, I was thinking organic matter is the key. No, it's not. Organic matter is important. Soil carbon is important. It's an energy resource and some nutrient resource, but it's an energy resource for these organisms. What did correlate was fungal to bacterial ratio. Another experiment, again, every time I did an experiment, I had a goal I was looking for, but it was always a side road that would pop up. This was one of them, to see 70% of the carbon in these systems in the greenhouse test go into the soil, not utilized by the plant. That didn't seem logical for a plant to put that much of the energy it captures back into the soil, unless there is a reason. So I did another experiment looking at a change in fungal to bacterial ratio of mixture of alluvial sand and compost. And in this, bacteria, pretty much the same all the way across, had 100 times increase in the fungal community. So my fungal to bacterial ratio went from 0.04 to 3.68, with agriculture hopefully somewhere around 1 on this. Also, my initial soil carbon was 2 grams to 38 grams, so a 20 times increase in the amount of carbon. This is what I first saw. Looking at the fungal to bacterial ratio here, the amount of carbon that that system put into the roots, the shoot, and the fruit. The gray is soil carbon, the blue is respiration. What I first noticed in this, that in a poor soil, a bacterial dominant soil, 96% of the energy that plant captured and fixed as carbon went into the soil. So it is important that we understand microbes need this carbon in the soil, need the sugars that these plants give. But as you can see, we get up to about a 1.6 to 1. You can see 3% soil organic matter is an observation by most farmers that at that point, the dynamics in plant growth change. As you can see, you plateau out right about that point. Pretty much linear growth in the plant biomass, and well, I'll see. So Soil carbon increases up to a point and this starts to decrease as far as the new carbon that's put in the soil, and respiration carbon starts to taper off. Nitrogen, similar things happening. At that 3% soil organic matter, this system is intelligent. It can sense what environment it has. So at 3% soil organic matter, it starts to reduce the amount of carbon flow into nitrogen fixation. You realize it takes 6 units of carbon to fix 1 unit of nitrogen, so it's very energy intensive. So at that point, the system can recognize that there's sufficient nitrogen for us to grow what we need to grow. It starts reducing that input, and finally in the last treatment, it actually pulled nitrogen out of that system. So if you put all that together and look at the efficiency of the carbon flow, we look at the carbon that went into the nitrogen fixation, carbon that went into the plant and into the soil and into respiration. In a bacterial dominant soil, there was 3% of that carbon that actually went into plant, growing the plant. Fungal bacteria ratio of 0.84, 17%. 1.6, we had 21%. So as we're changing these soils, as we're going from a bacterial dominant to fungal dominant soil, we start to see increases in efficiency of increasing plant biomass. 3.02, we had 37%. Finally, at 3.68, we had 56%. And again, in agriculture, we're sitting in here. We have a very inefficient agricultural system as far as capturing energy from the sun and fixing it as carbon. This is where the reviewers have a problem. They say, okay, you're just more compost, more carbon, more nutrients. And yes, if you stop there, you'll see it's very linear compared to the increase in soil carbon. You take another step further and look, well, there was a certain amount that went into respiration of carbon. There was a certain amount that went carbon flow to nitrogen fixation. There was also a certain amount that went into the new soil carbon. You add those up cumulatively, you see you have more carbon flow into what is the biological functionality of this system, because every one of those is influenced by the biology in that soil. So how does this work in the real world? First, to give you a metric from where to measure, cultivated land averages about 650 grams of dry biomass per square meter. Your kelp beds and reefs about 2,500, tropical rainforest about 2,200. In the beam soils that I've been working on, I'm calling them biologically enhanced agricultural management. I'm seeing about 1,980 grams of dry biomass per square meter in that system, with the potential of up to 4,279. In the Landecker field research that I have, on the right, you have a piece of soil where I've treated with compost at 400 to 500 pounds per acre. It's a dusting, okay? Just a dusting on it. We're just putting biology into the soil. At that point, we grew cover crops, we green chopped them, we disced them in, and we planted again. The next winter cover crop, we planted this cover crop on both the control on this side and the one that had been under beam for a year previous. So you can see we had 5 times the biomass growth on one that had been under beam after 1 year. We quintupled the productive capacity of that soil. This is May 4th last year, crop on that same soil. It's about 48, 49 inches tall. It's gave me 881 grams of dry biomass per square meter, 264 pounds of nitrogen fixed just in the above ground biomass. And it only takes about 180 to get a crop through. So you have ample nitrogen for your next crop. This was the summer planting right after I took that winter cover crop down. June 23rd was about 4 inches tall. July 21st, 29 days later, it was 6 feet tall. Another 13 days later, it was 7 feet tall. Now this is black oilseed sunflower. It's supposed to get 4 to 5 feet tall, and it's supposed to have heads about like this on it. But you can see the heads were bigger than mine. The crop on the left is Sesbania. It's a summer legume. It also associates with mycorrhizal fungi. The first season we grew it, it's 4 feet tall. Second season, 6 feet tall. And this season, it's 12 feet tall. You can see it does nodulate. You have the nitrogen-fixing nodules, plus this is a tuft of mycorrhizae all around that surface of that root. This is this year's. I just took this the other day on that same plot. It's about 42, 43 inches high. Looked beautiful this year. Up to the yoke of that shovel is about 1 meter, so we're talking about 39, 40 inches tall. This is a pecan orchard, an immature pecan orchard. There's 10 years between the time you plant a pecan tree that you start to get commercially viable crops. During that period of time, in Las Cruces, they disc it, they spray it, they water it, they disc it, they spray it, they water it, they disc it, they spray it, they water it, all summer long. If they could just, and they're fighting weeds this whole time. If they just throw a cover crop on this and let this grow, they could be building up their soils. They wouldn't have to put nitrogen on. There is one farmer in our area that has been doing this, and he's increased the crop yield. He's increased the nut size. He's increased the nut fill, which increases the nut quality, which they get more money for. Pecans are normally on year, off year, on year, off year. Completely level that out. Restoring the biology in these soils does seem to work. This is a comparison on beam soils that have been half a year, 2.5 years, and 6 years, the difference in growth. It's just a change in biology. We spend a lot of time in ag trying to manipulate plant genes to get a plant to grow in poor soils. It makes more sense if we would improve the soils and see what the plants can do. We also see, this was the first 20 months on that beam soil at Landecker. Looking at micronutrient availability in the soil. Did 5 sampling periods on this 20-month study. And you can see the percent increase, 1,100%, 1,100%. Let me put it in a little easier to see. On the micronutrients, manganese and iron, over 1,100% increase. Magnesium and calcium, 86, 83 and 76. You can see even macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, in this system, we were not putting anything in. We were not taking anything out. We were just seeing what happens if we start to rebuild these soils. What happens to the micronutrients? As you can see, we do have to see increases. Same thing in a soil as far as water. In this point, the first 1% increase in soil carbon will quintuple the amount of water that you can store. I found this out the hard way with this last irrigation on that one pecan field. When I first started on this plot, it took 8 hours for the water to go into the soil. I asked the guy that was watering for me to water it for me. And I drive by twice a day, so I know 8 hours I'm going to see if there's water out there. Well, didn't see water out there this time. And I called him, he says, I did water it. So we've changed the infiltration rate into that soil. So it no longer takes 8 hours to get water in. In our part of the country, they get excavators, they dig 12 feet deep, trying to pop the soil up so it'll allow the water to flow. Water can stand on a field out there for over a week. Most of it evaporates. I also did another research on the desert soil, and this was a different approach. On the other one, everything was put back in. On this one, everything is taken off. I grow the cover crop, I cut it, I take it off, I plant again. And again, I've only treated this once at the very beginning with about 400 to 500 pounds of compost. The first winter cover crop we grew was 800 grams. This is the second one, 1,600 grams. This is the third one, 2,190 grams. Now, if you remember back to that chart about the productivity of our ecosystems, this is as productive as the most productive ecosystem on this planet. But you also have to consider this happened in 10 weeks. So I had the rest of the summer season to grow some. On that point, it was 583 pounds of nitrogen per acre in the above ground biomass. This is what it looked like winter cover from about 800 to 14 to 2200. And on that plot, I'm growing 3,000 grams of biomass per square meter per year. So I'm over and above any of the ecosystems on this planet, just changing the biology in the soils. Because this is a desert plot. When you look at it compared to the control, everything is normalized in the control. This is the compost. I'm a full year growth ahead after 7 growing periods. Not every biological amendment to a soil is advantageous. This is product X. It actually did worse than the control. And this is what you would expect from our agroecosystems today. The change in the soil profile. In the control, your A profile, where the carbon was accumulating, was about 2.5 inches. In the compost, it was 6.5 inches. So more carbon captured in the above ground biomass and in soils. So that's step 1 if we're going to reduce atmospheric CO2. Step 2, what happens to respiration? If the respiration increases at the same rate that we're putting in the soil, we've accomplished nothing, except maybe some good food. This is the trajectory for the last 4.5 years on that plot at Landecker. I've increased the carbon in that soil at a rate of 10.7 metric tons carbon per hectare per year. That's about 37 metric tons of CO2 per hectare per year. Or an annual increase in 0.24% carbon in the top foot of soil. When I compare it to what West studies, 67 long-term no-till studies, assume that we could do 0.57 tons carbon per hectare per year. Nigley, on his agroecosystems with mulching, 0.2. Law, with arable cropping systems, he sees 0.7. We've seen 10.7 average per year over the last 4.5 years, with a potential of 19.2. I don't know if any of you know Gabe Brown. He's a rancher in North Dakota. The first 13 years that he was trying to improve his soil, you can see he did not make much headway. He was putting carbon in at 0.11% carbon increase per year. At this point in his trials, he hit about 3% soil organic matter. He stopped using nitrogen fertilizers. He added in multi-species cover crops, and then finally livestock integration. He changed that slope of soil carbon increase from 0.11 to 0.56. Now, he bested what I was able to do, but he's just doing this with grazing management with cattle, and he has managed pastures. Soil carbon cowboys, a good video to see on that. 100,000 beating hearts, another great video that you should see. So we get better crop yields. Also, compared to conventional and beam after 1.5 years, you can see the difference. Down to some small trials on cotton production and chili production. Over conventional, 114% increase in cotton, 98% increase in chilies. Here's what organics hits in our area. They do worse than conventional. And yet, they have the potential of doing this with the right soil biology. In Western Australia, there's a wheat farmer that has started to adopt using compost. Now they do it a little differently from us and from what I did. They do it as an extract. They take a ton of compost with 70,000 liters of water, and then they'll put 70 liters of the extract that comes from those two on every hectare of land. And that's an application rate of 1 kilogram per hectare, or 1 pound per acre. So again, it's not a nutrient amendment. It's a biological inoculant. They have seen crops up to 3 tons wheat per hectare. They're in a region that gets 1.6. They have brought crops in at 100 millimeters. That's 4 inches of rain. Now these soils that they work with are very poor sandy soils. They're very acidic, they crust badly on the top, and yet when they put the biology in there, they're able to get root structures like this. They've been successful where their neighbors haven't. They are starting to buy up their neighbor's property, and they're going cold turkey just with biology. So again, less carbon respired in healthy soils would be the next step on this. In this research I did in the greenhouse, yes, there was an increase in respiration. But when you compare, it had 18 times increase in the beginning soil carbon mass over that treatment, but only a 4 times increase in respiration. When you look at the original amount of carbon that's respired in this system, in a poor bacterial dominant soil, 44% of the original carbon in that soil was respired. In a fungal dominant, healthy soil, only 11% of that original carbon was respired. So these two things put together, capturing more energy as biomass and reducing the respiration rate, give us great hope for reducing atmospheric CO2. We can actually, with the rates that Gabe was getting on his, approximately 20%, 22% of the arable land area on this planet can capture all anthropogenic CO2. I looked at this in soils in our system. This is a year's study looking at respiration rates. The rectangles represent the 80% of the measurements in that area, with the low and the high represented by the bar. As you can see, desert soil and controlled and conventional and transitional, the average was about 1.25 grams carbon per square meter per day. In a bean soil with 7 times the amount of carbon, the respiration only went up 1 and 2 times, up to 2.25. When I put all my greenhouse and field studies together, there was some good comparisons. This is what we can expect from respiration from the soil if we have a healthy, dynamic microbial community operating in it. So, biologically enhanced agriculture will increase soil fertility, increase the water storage in our soils, plant water use efficiencies, soil nutrient availability, length of growing season. It reduces your plowing and heavy tillage, your fertilizer applications. You don't need fertilizer in this if you have the right soil biology. Cut down on your downstream pollution of streams, rivers, lakes, aquifers. It allows farmers to transition to a sustainable, climate resilient, and ecosystem friendly approach to agriculture. Why should we pursue this? There is no planet B. Any questions? Yes?
Hi, so you're cutting the cover crop, and are you then removing or just keeping it in?
Okay, I have 2 different experiments. One at Landecker.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh.
Go ahead, take mine.
He's asking if I'm, what was he again?
Well, you're cutting and removing what you cut of the cover crop, or are you just keeping it in?
Okay, he asked if I'm cutting and removing it, or am I disking it in? I have 2 experiments going. One at Landecker, what I want to see the maximum rate of carbon capture of the soil if we really dedicate this to as a commodity for farmers. And that I'm cutting everything, green chopping it, disking it back in, and planting again. So everything stays in there. On the desert plot, I'm hauling everything off. I want to see the 2 ends of the extreme. How much can I pull out of this system and still be able to produce a crop with biology? And this one, how much carbon can I capture?
You replant both.
Yes, I replant almost immediately. I do disc. I do disturb the soil. I know that farmers are going to have to disc to be able to control some of the weeds that they get. Grasses can be really tough in a regular farming field. Yes?
Do you have any pictures of your commercial scale non-windrow composting system? Commercial scale one? I saw a small
Is that,
So like
it looks like that.
5 feet tall or so?
It's 5 feet tall, 4 feet diameter. I do it on a pallet. I have a pipe in there when I fill it at first. After one day, I pull the pipe out because the pile is completely stabilized with fungi at that point. You'll see the hyphal threads that have run through it. From that point on, I irrigate it once a day for 1 minute. I have it's on YouTube down here. It's under Johnson Sioux bioreactor, and then it's got a video of how to put it together, how to fill it. Yes, sir.
Yeah. As you, whether you add compost or an inoculum or cover cropping, whatever delivery system you're using, the object is to increase the soil microbes and move it in the direction away from bacterial to fungal, which is a higher life form.
Yes.
And the result is the higher life form emerging from that soil, working both in terms of quantity and perhaps quality.
Yes. It's moving towards more biological functionality that supports what we want out of that soil. As I say, it's controlled disturbance. We're trying to keep it in that one range of about 1 to 1 or 3 to 1, right in there, where we get the most productivity, where we are regenerating these soils, allowing all the systems that function to get the micronutrients, the macronutrients to function properly for what we want, and also restore that soil. Is that, okay, yeah, you said it very well. I should have given the mic to you. Oh, he was asking what materials you use in the composter. I've used straight wood chips. It takes a long time, but it will compost. I've used the cow manure, wood chips, yard waste, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 by volume. That's what I started with. I've done straight leaves. Horse manure, grape tomatoes. Horse manure. 62 pounds of tomatoes on one plant. She was asking, want me to relate to you the application rate. From what I'm seeing in Australia, it can be done on as little as 1 pound per acre. I've also mixed it in a slurry and coated the seed that I plant, and that also works effectively. You want the biology there when the seed starts to germinate. And in Australia, they make that extract and they spray it in when they plant the wheat. So it's active right when that starts to germinate.
For loading the reactor and mixing the different ingredients, do you have tips for how to get them mixed evenly?
What I usually do, if I don't have something to mix them, I'll put 3 buckets of each in layers.
Okay.
Or if it's just leaves, just leaves.
And how do you measure your carbon in the soil before and after application?
LECO. I do its actual combustion analysis. It's the one standard that every other method is, and I do it in the top foot. Most people will do it in the top 10 centimeters to 15, but I want to know the whole foot.
Cool, thanks so much.
Sure.
Just one more.
Hi. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the carbon sequestration issue, and from what I'm understanding, you talk about maybe like the maximum capacity of the soil receiving the carbon. And so then if I'm thinking of sequestration, I'm thinking that we want to get this maximum capacity, what the soil will take in the way of carbon, after which it's not going to absorb any more, and maybe spread out over a distance and clean the world that way. And is that the issue if we're talking about, because once the soil reaches its maximum capacity, are we talking about moving on? I mean...
No, I don't believe so.
And then let me add, if we project 50 years from now, where are we there? Is this about getting the world to compost, which makes sense anyway?
Let me answer the last one first. The compost is a part of this. It will still happen without it, but it takes more time. The compost is like a yeast to a dough. And as far as there is a limit on the amount of carbon the soil will build up, but there's no limit on the amount of soil that can be built. So you have to look at this differently. How did we get 6 feet deep topsoils in our prairies? It didn't happen overnight, of course, but it happened with that disturbance. It happened with the bison, the way they came through. But you are not considering also the ability of that soil to capture more carbon in the biomass, above ground biomass. It only takes 289 grams per square meter of arable land to capture all anthropogenic CO2 also. So we're increasing our ability to grow biomass. That's another mechanism we're pulling carbon out. It's temporary. Some of it's temporary, some of it isn't. So, and there's also dynamics as you change the soil microbial community structure to fungal dominant. There's another process that nature uses to capture carbon, and that's through an oxalate cycle. Oxalotrophic bacteria, they lock up calcium carbonate, and it's leached down. And a lot of it you see in the desert, you see the caliche. That was what that came from, was fungi manipulating our environment. And it's happened all the way through the formation of Earth. These microbes have changed everything. Does that answer?
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we'll take 5 minutes and we'll come on back. We'll have the panel ready to go. Thank you guys so much. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Johnson.